I know one thing that's happened a lot since we last spoke are all these conversations about people, they go into work and all of a sudden they've lost access. They've lost computer access. They're kind of shown the door that day. Or and again, I don't know specifically if there was any communication before. I'm not with at the companies. I know it's posted, but it just seems to me that if that seems to be taking things to a major extreme. And I know a company may be concerned about if we give you notice, you're going to take their information, you're going to do bad stuff and all that. But it just seems to me to be almost draconian with what that is.
Yeah, I've had plenty of clients where that was the work policy and that did happen to them. They felt shamed about it. It was almost like they were being, frog marched out the door in shackles. Um, Management can do it. They can cite a security concern about what happens if you know, and what will you do to your computer? Will you mess it up? Will you take something? Um, I can't really get into that mindset. I've always used the idea that I want to be good to people, even in an exit interview, and say, "Here's what happened. We tried this. It seemed to work, but then it didn't work. I'll give you a reference.
Mm-hmm.
Here's your unused sick time or PTO." But unfortunately, some employers, it's more like a pitched battle, and they know where the enemy lines are. I mean, you can imagine, working for Tesla, what their policy is about when they walk you to the door. I think it's gonna be tough.
Right.
Um, I also want to say to people, watch out what you take, because let's say your computer's down, things aren't working exactly well, but you have a desk filled with documents. You can take anything that involves you individually, emails, memos, things that you worked on that are not proprietary. But you really got to be careful about taking stuff that doesn't belong to you, especially if it's like private information.
What
There's
if
a case in New Jersey, very nasty situation, where an employee was working at a school
Mhm.
and she had access to student records, and she was upset about something that they were doing with the kids. She took stuff that was HIPAA protected and ended up being charged with a crime, and a lawyer was threatened who got those materials and started using them in the case with being an accessory. So these days, in the employment law world that I'm in, the lawyers say to each other, you can ask generally what those people have in their possession. Tell them don't bring it to the meeting, and tell them I don't want to look at it, because you can't unsee it. I know, and this sounds a little bit like walking people out. It's like
well,
there's a concern about what could happen. So you start changing the practice that you've used for 50 years because something bad could happen.
what about your reviews? Like can you take along your reviews? Or is that considered
Yes, but
documentation?
this is an interesting thing. You'd be shocked how many times I say to people, "Were you getting performance reviews?" Absolutely, every year. And how many years did you work there? 20. Do you have your reviews? No, because maybe management never gave them a copy, and they had it and they got rid of it. But that, I think that's extremely valuable. That's one of the key things that lets a judge, a jury, your lawyer know whether what's happened to you is what's called, in fancy word, pretextual. Another word for that is a lie. They said it was for this reason, but it turned out to be that reason. We had a guy who was transporting NASA rockets on the ground because they got to get from place A to place B without flying. And they had to take down phone poles and wires. And he did this. He started out as a truck driver, but by the time he was in his early 60s, this guy, he had books that people put together showing photos of all this stuff. That guy was, and he had a letter of commendation for 10 years from the owner of the company. They fired him and said it was performance based. And all we had to do was pull together all the stuff that he had and said, "Are we talking about the same guy?" And we settled his case. So
Oh,
those
yeah,
those pieces of evidence are very important.